Greetings, this is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgia Catholic, with yet another Isaac Asimov short story. This is a real short. It made its first appearance in the summer 1977 issue of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine, which, even though it has his name on it, he much needs to send his stories in and they need to get through their editor as much as anybody else would, or he would at anybody else's publication. He set it up that way. But this one did get through, although there's a rather interesting promise they felt they had to make. So we'll get to that shortly when we get to the blurb. So we have it in here. The story is called Sure Thing, and by Isaac Asimov, page 46. Well, the Sure Thing, 47. Interesting. Okay. So, no pictures, no artwork, a blurb, however. And so, yeah. A little diagram on the page has nothing to do with the story whatsoever. It's just filling space. Okay, so, let's read the blurb, because that at least is something only in this magazine. And it says, continuing his response to Mr. Clarke's, that's Arthur C. Clarke, science fiction writer, science writer, challenge in the matter of SF puns. Our good doctor here offers another short, this one written especially for this contest. The editor, however, hastens to assure all of you readers that these will not be a permanent feature of this magazine. Well, that's good. I don't want to deal with a lot of these. Unfortunately, for those who like shaggy dog stories or feghoots or something, or another expression I've seen for this, this is definitely one. And we had one a few stories ago called About Nothing, where somebody said, much adieu, French, goodbye, about nothing. And as we know, it's a pun on the Shakespearean title for one of the plays, Much Ado About Nothing. Well, this was also a pun. It was bad. I mean, looking at it, when we got to the thing itself, I couldn't even figure out what it was. What's this supposed to sound like? I couldn't. I had to look it up. Until then, it sounded like something that could have been the result of a horse race. Slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race by a nose, just ahead of Geronimo, with Lucky Strike and Sally's pal taking third and fourth place. And given that this whole story is just a science fiction-y, futuristic placed, well, it's not exactly a horse race, but it's a race. It's 30th century of ours, and space travel is fearfully dull and time-consuming. So they have diversions, they pick up pets. So we have a gentleman by the name of Jim Sloan who has a Rockette. And no, it's not one of those high-kicking girls on some team or something. It's hard to imagine Asimov not having heard of them. But no reference intended to them that I can see besides the name Rockette, which could also sound like a little rock, a small rock, a pet rock, really. Only this pet rock is apparently somewhat really alive. He names the rock Teddy. His name is Jim Sloan. He's got this rocket that he names Teddy, and it would just sit there looking like a rock. Except sometimes it would lift a lower edge and suck in some powdered sugar. I wonder how he knew what to feed it. Okay. And no one would ever see it move, although every now and then you discover it wasn't where it was last seen. And he decides to put on a race between that and a heliworm named Dolly, who is green and carries on by photosynthesis. And it would sometimes tend to move towards the light. Okay. So they have the race. But he knew it was going to sure thing. Well, Sloane's Teddy wins the race. That sounds like a weird, like I said, it sounds like a win of a horse race. And I had to look it up to figure out what that meant. That's how obscure it was. But maybe for other people. You ever heard the story of the tortoise and the hare? Well, there is one way the moral of that little story can be told. And if you have a particular way it is, you can figure out what this is. If not, you probably have to do what I did and look it up. So it isn't even all that great of a thing. I'm decidedly rather disappointed. I've never had much affection for such stories in the first place. Puns seldom, if ever, appeal to me, and this one certainly doesn't. The story did get collected into Winds of Change, and it has the same title, Sure Thing. And in this book, it just has no artwork, no blurb. It's the story, so far as I can tell, the same. Okay, there it is. I'm sorry that this installment isn't more interesting, but sometimes you can only do so much with a story that itself could use more interest to it. Thanks for listening.